Hello. Today we'll be talking about how do you take a thesis statement you've developed, check to make certain that it has all of the requisite parts, and then develop it step by step into a full sentence outline. Full sentence outlines are not so necessary when you're writing short papers that have maybe 5 paragraphs to them. But as you begin to do more research and write more complicated essays, it's important that you be able to rough them out in full sentence outlines so that you don't have to retain everything in your mind at once and you can focus on your essay just one paragraph at a time. So let's assume that you have an essay thesis that is making maple syrup, which comes from the sap of sugar maple trees, involves a process that has a number of steps. If you'll remember about point, let's check to make sure it has the 2 necessary components to make a good thesis statement. And so we'll ask the about point questions. First of all, what is this sentence about? Well, you can see that it's about making maple syrup. So that's the topic. And then we've got to ask the other question, which is, what's our point about making maple syrup? And you can see from this sentence that making maple syrup in blue involves a process that has a number of steps. So it does have a subject or a topic, and it does have a point about the subject or the topic. And the clause that's between the two, which comes from the sap of sugar maple trees, is neither the subject nor is it the point. It's just a modifier along the way. So it's okay that it's there, but it would not be okay if that were the thesis statement trying to stand alone. So yes, we have a complete thesis statement. And we can tell by looking at it that it says the process has a number of steps. So if we know that there are 32 steps, we'll have 32 paragraphs within this essay. Hopefully it doesn't have 32 steps, but you can determine the number of paragraphs, the minimum number of paragraphs between your introductory paragraph, which concludes your thesis, and your concluding paragraph simply by knowing the number of steps, or if this were not a steps in a process essay, the number of other components of some sort. So, okay, we're ready to go. In a full sentence outline, the sentence that is your topic sentence for the first paragraph also has to be a complete sentence. And in this case, ours is, first, the sap has to be gathered from the trees. Okay. Maybe we don't know a lot about how you gather sap from trees. So we will have discovered or already knew a number of steps it takes to gather sap from the trees. And in this case, we've discovered that there are at least 4 elements that need to be provided in order to explain gathering the sap from the trees. And so our first detail is, first you choose healthy trees, larger than 30 centimeters in diameter. And that's a complete sentence. So our next detail tells us how to drill tap holes at an angle that will allow the sap to drip down into the bucket. That's a complete sentence. And our detail number 3 is tap the spile or the drain tube into place. That's a complete sentence. Actually, it's a complete sentence. Each of these is a complete sentence because the subject implied is you. You choose, you drill, you tap, and then finally you hang the bucket beneath the spile. So we're assuming that the writer in this case feels that this is sufficient amount of detail to explain how you actually go about gathering the sap from the trees. Then, having fully explained the first step in this process, we move on to the topic sentence for the second step. And we see that The sap then has to be transported to the sugar house. Well, I don't know how many details one needs to have in explaining transportation to the sugar house, but in our model here we have 3 details listed, or the possibility of 4, 5, 6, or 7, or however many we need. And once we've fully developed this topic sentence with full sentence descriptions of the details, we're ready to move on to the next step in the process. And it appears that the third step in the process, at least according to this essay, is to boil the sap. So our topic sentence for the paragraph is, the sap is boiled. Now, on the surface of it, when I first look at this, it seems to me, okay, boil the sap. That seems to be enough to say. But then I started thinking further and mentally trying to get the sap boiled, and I developed in my own mind a number of questions. So my fully developed sentences in details, the first one would be the answer to the question, so how long does it have to boil? My answer might be, the sap has to boil for 3 hours. I don't know what the truth is, but let's assume that. The sap has to boil for 3 hours. My next question is, at what temperature? And the answer to that would be the sentence that would be your next fully developed detail. And then I begin to have other questions that I think I'll need to answer. Well, all right, I'm going to boil it at a certain temperature for a certain length of time. Then what has to happen next? Now I've got a vat full of boiling sap. So the answer to that question, what happens next, would become my detail 3. And it might be something like, you have to let it cool and stand for at least 2 hours before you can try to move it. I don't know if that's true again, but that's what you would say. So we would have as many details under the topic sentence, this sap is boiled, as the writer feels is necessary to fully explain that topic sentence. And next in this essay that we're developing, the topic sentence for the next paragraph or the next section would be, the cured syrup must be bottled and packaged for distribution. Well, if you look at that, the topic is the cured syrup, and what's the attitude or the point about it? Well, the point is it has to be bottled and packaged for distribution. Bottling is one thing, packaging is another, so I can tell already that there are at least 2 details needed to fully develop this sentence, and in all this topic sentence, and in all likelihood there may well be more. So as we fill in the complete sentences that are details 1, 2, and 3, we will be almost finished, except that in this particular essay, it happens that there are more than 4 steps. There's actually 5 and possibly a 6th, possibly a 7th, and so on. So we would have a separate topic sentence for each of those steps in this process, however many that may be. And then the essay will be finished with the exception of the concluding paragraph. And what you do in your concluding paragraph is remind your reader of what you were trying to explain. Making maple syrup. So you'd have a sentence that says something like, in conclusion, making maple syrup is a process that involves, let's pick 7 steps. That would bring us our paragraph or our essay to a close with the concluding paragraph. And then, of course, the last thing you have to do is proofread your essay. And then you will be done.